Patrice Lumumba, the Pan-Africanist who was shot dead by firing squad, dug back out of the ground, sawed apart, and dissolved in acid so there'd be nothing left to bury. He'd spent 2 months as prime minister before 3 governments were already working to remove him, and it traces back to one afternoon when he stood up in front of a king and said something nobody expected him to say. On June 30th, 1960, Belgium was set to formally give Congo its independence, and the plan was simple: a ceremony, some speeches, and Congo would officially become its own country for the first time. Belgium's own king, Baudouin, came to be there for it, since Congo hadn't been just any colony to Belgium, but had been treated almost like a personal possession since the 1880s. Baudouin spoke first and called Congo's independence the crowning result of the work started by King Leopold II decades earlier, the same Leopold whose rule over Congo is remembered for forced labor, mutilation, and a death toll historians count in the millions. The room applauded politely because nobody expected anything different to happen next. Then Lumumba stood up, even though he hadn't been scheduled to speak, because nobody had prepared him a script for what he was about to say. He talked about the beatings Congolese people had lived through under Belgian rule. He talked about being addressed as tu instead of vous in French. Vous being the respectful form owed to any adult, tu, the casual form normally reserved for children or close friends, used deliberately on Congolese adults as a daily, deliberate way of signaling that a Congolese man wasn't owed the same respect as a European adult, even in something as small as a pronoun. He talked about land that had been taken, families broken apart, decades of being told all of it was for their own good. He said this live on the radio, standing a few feet from the king who had just called the whole thing a gift. Baudouin leaned over and said something to Kasavubu, the man about to become Congo's first president, sitting beside him, as if he were asking whether anyone in the room had actually known this speech was coming. Everything Lumumba said that afternoon was true. None of it could be disputed against Belgium's own colonial records, which raises the question of why one honest speech ended up costing him more than anything he actually did once he was in power. That's where this story really starts. The answer started showing itself almost immediately, because within 2 weeks of that speech, Congo's army mutinied over how unfairly Congolese soldiers were still being treated by the Belgian officers still running it. And while that mutiny was still unfolding, Congo's richest province, Katanga, announced it wasn't going to be part of Congo anymore. Katanga sat on some of the largest copper and cobalt deposits on the planet, and for over 50 years, a Belgian mining company called Union Minière had run the province almost like its own private business, answering to nobody in Congo's government. When a Katangan politician named Moïse Tshombe declared the province independent just 11 days after Congo itself became free, it wasn't really his decision alone, because Belgian soldiers helped arm the breakaway, and Union Minière's money was funding it, since the company had no intention of ever answering to a government led by Lumumba. Lumumba turned to the United Nations for help, asking them to use force and bring Katanga back under his government's control. The UN did send peacekeepers into Congo, but they refused to use them for that, holding on to their official position of staying neutral in the conflict. So the one thing Lumumba was actually asking for, the UN wouldn't give him. Blocked there, he turned somewhere else. He asked the Soviet Union for support instead, at the height of the Cold War, when a request like that wasn't read as a Congolese leader looking for help. It was read as a signal about which side he was really on. And in Washington, that signal reached people who were already paying very close attention. By August, Eisenhower's own administration was pushing hard behind closed doors for Lumumba to be removed from power entirely, and a month later, CIA Director Allen Dulles told a National Security Council meeting that Lumumba remained a grave danger as long as he was not disposed of. Exactly how far up that order went has never been fully settled. A U.S. Senate investigation years later, the Church Committee, found it reasonable to infer Eisenhower's personal involvement, but stopped short of proving it outright, since the officials in the room gave conflicting accounts of what was actually said. What isn't in dispute is what came next. The CIA's own poisons expert flew to Congo carrying a poison meant for Lumumba's toothbrush or his food, and handed it directly to Larry Devlin, the CIA's station chief on the ground. Something ordinary enough that nobody would ever suspect it. Devlin later said he considered the order morally wrong, but rather than refuse it outright, he simply stalled again and again until Lumumba was killed by other means entirely. He says he took the poison out of his own office safe afterward and threw it into the Congo River unused. So, the direct plan to kill Lumumba failed, but by the time it did, Washington didn't actually need it anymore because there was already someone else in place who could do the job for them, and he wasn't some outside operative flown in for the task. He was already standing inside Lumumba's own government. His name was Joseph Mobutu, a 29-year-old colonel serving as Lumumba's own army chief of staff, and the CIA's station chief in Congo, Larry Devlin, had been quietly funding and guiding him for months already, long before anyone in Congo's government understood how deep that relationship went. The opening Mobutu needed came from inside Congo's own leadership. In September 1960, President Kasavubu dismissed Lumumba as prime minister, and Lumumba responded by trying to dismiss Kasavubu right back. So for several days, the country had two men simultaneously claiming to be the legitimate government, with no clear answer as to who actually had the authority to fire the other. Mobutu ended that standoff himself. He seized power, suspended the Constitution, and placed both rival leaders under armed guard, which meant the man Belgium and Washington wanted gone was no longer running the country. He was confined to his own house, watched by soldiers, cut off from the government he'd been elected to lead only months earlier. House arrest should have been the end of the story right there. But in late November, Lumumba made a decision that changed everything again. He slipped past the soldiers guarding his house, trying to reach his own supporters further east, where he still had real political strength. He didn't make it far, and on December 1st, he was captured in Kasai province and flown back into custody. And from that point forward, the story stopped being about keeping him out of power and became something else entirely. In mid-January 1961, a new decision was made. John F. Kennedy was days from being sworn in as the new American president, and the men holding Lumumba worried that a change in Washington might mean softer treatment for him going forward. So instead of waiting to find out, they decided to fly him somewhere else entirely, not to a neutral location, but straight into Katanga, into Moise Tshombe's hands, into the one place in the entire country where officials had already said out loud that they wanted him dead. He landed there on January 17, 1961. He wasn't landing into safety, and everyone flying him there knew it. On the flight itself, Lumumba and two of his closest political allies, Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okito, were beaten by the soldiers guarding them. When they landed, the beating continued, and the three men were paraded in front of Tshombe and his ministers, the same men who now had complete control over what happened next. They didn't wait long to decide. Within hours of landing, the three men were driven out to a clearing in the bush where a firing squad was waiting under Belgian command. Okito and Mpolo were shot first. Then Lumumba was walked to a tree of his own and shot separately, the last of the three to die. Belgian officers organized the transfer, ran the operation, and gave the order to fire, though even now, historians don't fully agree on whose hands actually pulled the trigger, whether it was the Belgian officers themselves or Katangan soldiers acting on their orders. Either way, the men responsible for the decision and the men standing over the bodies afterward were the same ones. But killing him wasn't where this part of the story ends, because what happened to his body afterward is its own kind of horror. Katanga's government didn't tell anyone what they'd done. They buried the three men in a shallow grave and let almost a month pass in silence, putting out a story instead that Lumumba had simply escaped custody. It wasn't until February 13th that they finally admitted he was dead, nearly 4 weeks after they'd actually killed him, giving themselves enough time to shape the story before the world outside could check it against anything real. But the grave still wasn't the end of it. A Belgian police officer named Gerard Soete was sent to dig the three bodies back up. Working at night with his brother's help, he sawed the remains apart and dissolved them in barrels of sulfuric acid, making sure there would be nothing left that could prove what had happened, and no grave left standing that anyone could ever turn into a place of pilgrimage. Before he did, he kept one thing back for himself: a gold-crowned tooth from Lumumba's body, which he later called, without any shame, a trophy. He didn't admit any of this publicly for almost 40 years. In 1999, on Belgian television, he finally confessed to what he'd done. His daughter still had the tooth as late as 2016, when Belgian authorities finally took it into custody. It wasn't returned to Lumumba's children until June 2022, which meant a gold tooth was the only physical piece of Congo's first prime minister his family ever got the chance to bury. Belgium eventually put some of this on paper. A parliamentary inquiry in 2001 concluded that the country bore moral responsibility for what happened, though not legal responsibility, and in 2002, the government issued a formal apology to Lumumba's family and to Congo. For years, that was as far as it ever went. Nobody was charged with anything. That finally looked like it might change this year. In January 2026, a Brussels court began weighing whether to try Etienne d'Avignon, the last surviving figure among 10 Belgians originally accused, a man who had been a 28-year-old trainee diplomat in Congo back in 1961 and went on to a long, celebrated career as a Belgian statesman. In March, the court ruled that he would stand trial for war crimes tied to the deaths of Lumumba, Mompolo, and Okito, and it was being called historic. The first time any European government had ever put someone in a courtroom over a colonial-era political killing. Then in May, before the trial could even begin, d'Avignon died at 93. His death ended the case outright, since there was no one left alive to charge, and while his family says they'll pursue a separate civil case against the Belgian state, the criminal case, the one that after 65 years finally looked like it might produce a real verdict, was gone. There's one more thing worth knowing, and it isn't really a separate story so much as the same one, still running under a different name. Katanga, the province Lumumba was flown into to die, still produces roughly 70% of the world's cobalt today, the metal inside every phone battery and every electric car on the planet. The company town has changed hands, the flags flying over the mines have changed, but the fight over who actually profits from what's under that ground has never really stopped. People are still out there right now trying to take that fight back, trying to make sure Africa's own wealth actually stays with Africa. Do you think any of them actually get to win it? Or does it always end up going the same way? Or what would you suggest? This is episode 25 of TerraVox. If this is the first time you've heard the full story of how Patrice Lumumba died and everything that happened to make sure the truth about it took 65 years to even get close to a courtroom, then subscribe or follow so you don't miss the next episode. See you in the next one.